Oh, this conversation, well, firstly, thank you, Zoe, for that. But now this conversation has been dying to carry on right now. We've been getting so many comments on social media. We're talking about the current agreements taking place between Santaco, the current taxi violence, and the potential and the results of everything that is currently happening. What does it all mean?
JP, thank you so much for staying with us this morning. I know you've got a lot to do today, some of it very political, some of it very human. You're going to be going to a funeral later this evening, so we're certainly giving you as much strength as we can in that space. When we talk about the vehicles that are currently still impounded, Minister Chikunga saying that those will be released. What are the conditions of that? What does that mean? Is this backtracking on that initial understanding? Where do we sit in terms of these particular vehicles? Because they do seem to be a major pressure point.
Yeah.
I think the impoundment is the key issue of the debate. There were other things that during the taxi task team that Santaco walked away from were discussed. They wanted additional operating permits on certain routes and certain contested routes that the city and the province assessed. There were additional permits made available. I think there were 700 permits placed on the system. More than 300 of those sit there uncollected.
Unused.
So maybe that wasn't truly the real reason. I think there's a difference between the publicly stated motives and sometimes what really drives an issue. Certainly the impoundment and the enforcement is a major issue. We believe that it is necessary. As I said, those commuters' lives matter to me. They may not matter to the industry as much as they should because they're captive customers, but they do matter to us. And the impoundments are done in terms of the act. I can tell you, if we had done them unlawfully, they would have been in court already and reversed it.
Because there is recourse.
There is recourse. There are democratic institutions. If we had done so incorrectly, they would have been in court long ago. Minister Chikunga has indicated in public that she is instructing the city to release those vehicles. She hasn't done so yet because it is not lawful. And if she does attempt to do so, we will resist that in court because it isn't legal. There is no legal mechanism to do what she proposes. You will remember that some years ago, Minister Cele also issued an unlawful instruction on a beach to a film crew. We had to get an interdict against him. It does appear to me that sometimes the national ministers are not as well-versed in the laws that they're the custodians of as they should be. And on this one, we understand that National Land Transport Act extremely well, and we are confident that we've acted fully lawfully. There is a part of the agreement with Santaco is that those vehicles that are impounded for what they call petty offences, parking offences, stopping on a yellow line and that kind of thing, or for minor damage to the vehicle, we don't believe we've impounded any vehicles for that. We've checked very carefully. They maintain it is so. We've said that's not a problem. Make representation to us. We will, on your behalf or with you, write to the public prosecutor to ask for those cases to be withdrawn. They have yet to approach us with any such examples, but we don't believe that that we've impounded for stuff that does not materially affect life and safety.
Or illegally, for that matter. Yeah. They are not illegally impounded.
Remember that every single vehicle, every single public transport offence is impoundable. In terms of the National Act, we can technically impound for every single offence. We impound for every 50 fines we write, we impound one vehicle. All those 50 fines could also be impoundment. So we're not heavy-handed. We're just trying to be very consistent in the enforcement law and equality before the law. The same laws that apply to private motorists must also apply to public transport vehicles, and even more so because you are holding the lives of many other people in your hands.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Follow due court process.
For me, I think that really is the actual question we should be asking at the end of the day. How does this serve the people? Are these rules, are these agreements actually going to be serving the people? Is it protecting them at the end of the day? And I think generally when we are looking at the law, if we're abiding by that, it definitely does play a part in that. This seems like this affects not only taxis as well, but anybody essentially that has any issue on the road. So maybe with that being said, what are the sort of examples of someone going through this process right now? If their car is impounded for any of these new bylaws that have been put in place legally, so what do they do? What are their rights? And then what should they be worried and concerned about?
So by and large, when we impound public transport vehicles, the minibus taxis, for instance, very often the owner will be waiting at the pound by the time the vehicle is driven back to the pound. So the vehicles are released extremely rapidly. We have around 500 vehicles in the pound at the moment. So I said earlier we impound between 900 and 1,200 vehicles a month, and that is an attempt to materially change behaviour. Fines do not change behaviour. And if you're government and you keep on doing the same ineffective thing over and over, you are useless government. Your actions must lead to the change in behavior.
Systemic change.
Correct. Increased compliance with the Road Traffic Act and fewer deaths. Our road death toll by international standards is outrageous. We have way more people dying and needlessly dying on our roads than we should. So if your vehicle's impounded, it is a visit to the pound, you pay the impoundment fee, and those vehicles are released back in your care. There are some vehicles like the offence of street racing, where the vehicle impoundment remains until the end of the criminal proceedings. You're charged for reckless and negligent driving. That vehicle is an exhibit, and we hold on to that vehicle until the end of the legal proceedings. These measures are not about being heavy-handed or being difficult. It's about making sure that the same offence does not happen over and over, and that the other people on the road whose lives you roll the dice with,
not in
that
danger.
they are not subject to your recklessness. They have rights also.
Where do we stand right now? It feels like we're okay. Are we going to go back 2 weeks from now when certain elements aren't adhered to on either side? How do we approach the next stanza of this relationship with the taxi council? How are we going to navigate the next few waters, knowing that this is how easily we can step backwards?
So I don't believe that the strike was needed in the first place by the industry. Our discussions at the taxi task team, that body was the forum that was created for us to talk to each other between provincial government, city government, and Santaco, had not reached an impasse. In fact, many of the issues now being raised were never raised at that body. So we had not reached an impasse or deadlock that you can say, well, this process has failed, therefore
broken down, yeah.
The agreement that we placed on the table the first day, on that Thursday, I went to my colleagues and said, it's very easy. We write a standard operating procedure. We separate impoundable from non-impoundable offences because the Act says may impound. So we can separate those without impairing safety. We will focus on those behaviours that do cause death, moving violations, where the movement of your vehicle is a risk to others, as opposed to stationary or less serious violations. We can easily do that. That's the same offer they effectively accepted now a week later, but with a great deal of misery and reputational loss for our whole country and loss of life in the intervening 10 days, needlessly so. We have the agreement we've now reached has certain very important measures. One, it says that any resorting to any kind of violence renders the entire agreement null and void. Okay. So there is a commitment to not resuming the same kind of violence. Keep in mind, in the background, the criminal justice process is working. We've opened 200 criminal cases. We arrested about 150 people in relation to public violence incidents. There are criminal investigations into the death of Officer Quinana and others. So we're not leaving any of those matters. That malicious damage to property and the Criminal Law Amendment Act matters, we are proceeding with those. It's important that accountability is there. Don't destroy somebody or kill somebody and then just walk away at the end with an agreement. Yeah. There's a de-escalation mechanism that says that the strike will not be undertaken until a de-escalation process has been attempted. There is a commitment to not doing any strikes without 36 hours notice, so that people are not left high and dry because a strike is announced.
Mothers aren't left.
And there are mechanisms in the Act to ensure that everybody behaves, or in the agreement to ensure that everybody behaves more reasonably. We've returned to the taxi task team. That first meeting is tomorrow again, and then we'll try and finalise the standard operating procedure, give the taxi industry some clarity around when we impound and when not. I don't believe that we impound for the things that they say is petty, but it'll be better if that's written down and absolute confidence is gathered. In these intervening 2 weeks, we're only impounding for 4 things: no operating licence, contrary, off-route, unroadworthy vehicle, and no driver's licence. All the rest of the offences, having a firearm in the vehicle, all that kind of stuff, which is in the Act and in the conditions of the permit.
Covered, yeah.
Those we will be part of the discussion tomorrow as to which is on the serious and less serious list. In the meantime, we're focusing on driver behaviour, and as the owners said, they want us to focus on the outstanding warrants on the drivers.
Busy week ahead, an incredibly tense few weeks, I would imagine, for you and your team. So thank you for keeping your head. I think everybody in this dynamic needs to really take a step back. And I'm so glad that at a point, sanity did prevail, but at what cost? So thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. I know you've got an incredibly busy day.
Thank you to all the public who stood with us and who suffered that inconvenience and challenges and sometimes damage to cars and stuff. To all of our staff who sat in the jock hours on end, missed their families for 10 days, all the SAPS members who stood with us, And some of the taxi operators who didn't want to be part of the violence, who informed us, who called us and said, this is happening tomorrow, please take the necessary precautionary action. So to those who stood on the right side of the law and held the line, thank you to them.
Thank you so much. Calm is restored in the city of Cape Town. We hope it continues and that more constructive and less violent forms of dialogue can take place between all parties. Thank you once again for your time, JP.
Yes, sir.